Around the bend and around the corner, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I tell you, some of the stuff behind the scenes is really hilarious. Sometimes I wish we had cameras following everybody around so they can see what all is taking place and what's going on. It is really entertaining from week to week trying to bring the show. So tonight we are live. If you want to participate in the show, by all means, you can use the chat feature. Chat with us. We'll be able to see it. Hopefully, I think we've got some of the bugs worked out before where we couldn't see some issues and we weren't live on some of the channels. I think we got all those things resolved and we're back live on most of our platforms. So if you want to chat with us, if you got a question, by all means, be interactive with us and we'll try to make sure that we weave you into the conversation. Tonight, very special night. Good friend of the show is back with us again. Dean Croke from DAT. He is back with us again, and we're talking all things rates, lanes, what's going on in the market, the volatility in the market. Of course, we got to talk about the elephant in the room with yellow and everything that's going on there. So if you have questions, if you got any concerns, anything like that when it comes to rates or any kind of information when it comes to anything that's going on in the market right now, tonight is a special night that you definitely want to make sure that you get involved in the conversation because we have a man here with the actual facts and numbers that can help kind of point you in the right direction and show you exactly what's causing what. So with that being said, I don't want to belabor the point. Let me welcome my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, into the show this evening. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Well, we're doing great. I'm really excited about having Dean on again because he's always so informative and he knows so much about every little thing. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Dean is a wealth of information, and we are fortunate enough to call him a friend of the show, for him to come on and share with us, break down all of the different numbers and everything that's behind the scenes that we may or may not be aware of. And like I said, so I don't want to belabor the point. Let's go ahead and welcome our special guest, Mr. Dean Croke, into the show. Dean, good evening, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. But I bet the guys at Upstaging that just got the 50 drivers that just got the 5 million from Taylor Swift as a bonus would be happier. How about that? She apparently gave the 50 truckers a bonus of 5 mil, so that works out at about 100 grand each.
Wow. Whoa. Wait.
Yeah, breaking news.
$5 million to 50
their tour's coming up towards a close, I think on August 9, and she's giving bonuses out to a lot of her different crews. And the article in the Post this afternoon is that 5 million was allocated to the 50 truckers for the tour. And that's, of course, I think that's all Upstaging, the company from Illinois, all the red trucks. Right. They do it. So good for them. It's a tough gig. Any truck driving job is tough, but heck, that's like a year's worth of salary right there as a bonus.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, I mean, that's definitely unheard of. Kudos to Taylor Swift. Then, if that's the case, I know that those tours make I know when they came to Atlanta. Yeah, she and Janet Jackson were here in Atlanta on the same day, and they put out notices on the news. Don't even attempt to try to come downtown if you're not using the subway, because it was pandemonium and chaos.
There's pandemonium in Atlanta when they have a bloody soccer game.
My point precisely, Chuck. My point precisely. So you can only imagine with two huge superstars in town at the same time like that. It was absolutely bananas.
Apparently, that concert series generates so much GDP. Apparently, the Federal Reserve has been tracking the impact of the tour from city to city. It actually moves the national needle in terms of consumer spending, which is amazing to think about it.
Yeah. Her and actually Beyonce is coming to town here in a few. Well, we're gonna get back to trucking, ladies and gentlemen. We ain't gonna talk about pop culture all night.
So much for entertainment. So, gentlemen, let's start off with not great news. Two things. Number one, on behalf of the Rates and Lanes podcast, our sympathy to everybody at Yellow, all those people that lost their jobs, the creditors, everybody. It was a great company at its time, and it has been sick for a long, long time.
Yeah, very sad day to see so many good people unemployed. It's never a good day. It's interesting reading all the news, Chuck. Lots of people sort of apply this through an economic lens about what it means, and they really forget the softer, more painful side of being out of work. And I've had it happen twice to me in my career. In fact, in the last 10 years, I've ended up being laid off and out of work twice. And it's something you never think will happen to you until it happens. And usually it happens with not much notice.
Yeah,
I suspect in the case of Yellow, the writing's been on the wall for quite a lot of time, because there was the Yellow acquisition of Roadway.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of folks that moved from Akron, I think it is, to Overland Park. Overland Park, have I got that right? And there are a bunch that didn't. And I think there were kind of a couple of different cultures, that those that moved and summarily got fired shortly thereafter, after all their corporate IP was transferred.
That's a blow to your culture right there when you start doing stuff like that. That's the kiss of death.
And we, Ken Adamo, my boss, was talking about that today on our show. Because he's ex FedEx, and has a lot of friends in the LTL business, and he was telling us about. He was saying that there were people that moved, lost their jobs. There were people that didn't move, and there were people that moved and did great, and they did very well out of it. So there was lots of mixed feelings about it. Someone that works at DAT had worked there for many years and said that there was always a culture of wage cuts. So it was always a company under pressure, I think, financially, and especially when you now start to read the gory details of how much debt the company was carrying, but in particular balanced by, I think, what looked like a fairly bad pricing model, as in, they ended up with a lot of low-priced freight.
Yeah.
Because you have to ask yourself, so how does Old Dominion and Sire and Dayton Freight do so well in this market, and others don't?
What, they're better. First of all, they are much better run companies. And if I am not mistaken, and maybe one of our listeners or one of you gentlemen wants to correct me on this, part of Yellow's problem originally was it was an old deal made with their union employees, and and the people ended up living a hell of a lot longer than they were supposed to. When the actuaries wrote this, agreed to this pension, these people were supposed to die at 68 years old, or 62 or whatever the age was, and some of them lived 40 years longer,
right?
Or their wives did, and that really, apparently, that took a real toll to start with, and then to try to bounce back from that. And of course, there's been there has not been a harmonious relationship between Yellow and the union, which makes it bad too. And then you were right, Dean. Yellow became a company that was known for rates, and you can't run as we were talking before, with the expenses of any trucking company. And yes, those LTL trucks may run at $10 or $20 a mile, but they have a huge infrastructure cost.
Right, all the handling, all the P&D trucks.
Yeah, they've got local P&D, and they've got terminals and all that. It gets expensive.
Chuck, I remember I did a consulting job at Roadway many, many years ago when I first moved to this country, and I remember them telling me that the average parcel gets touched 6 times from pickup to delivery, because it's the hub and spoke model.
Right.
You got the pickup, then you got the offload. The hub and spoke gets on the conveyor belt, goes through 4 or 5 different hubs. And you think about the damages to that. So there's a lot of damages. We had Nicole Glenn from Canada Expedite on our show today talking about why her business in the expedite LTL space is doing so well. It's because of the lack of touching of the freight and the reduction in damages and insurance claims. So they're starting to pick up more freight now that's traditional LTL, but going out in part truckloads, so maybe 8 to 10,000 pounds. And I think that's where she's adamant that there's a lot more growth going to occur in the LTL expedite, box truck, straight truck, liftgate market as a result of these changes, because I think this is sort of one of those shifts in the market that opens up a lot of opportunities. And I'll tell you why I think she's right. She said a lot of freight forwarders that would normally use LTL/yellow, freight forwarders are consolidating on their end and then using line haul truckloads.
Yep.
So if you think that through, it's kind of a seismic shift in how the market thinks about moving freight, which I guess there's always opportunity that comes out of crises, right?
Of course.
This is one, but I'll tell you a quick story while we're on it. My first consulting job, because Australia, we run multiple trailers on almost everything, right? So we're always used to 2 and 3 and 4 trailers. I was at the roadway terminal and they had the 2 28-foot trailers, which when I first moved here was a bit of a novelty, because they said, "Oh, come and have a look at our double." And I said, "That's not a double." It's a bit like Paul Hogan on, Crocodile Dundee. That's not a double. I said, "That's not a double. This is a double." I said, "This is a double. We're going to hook 2 50-foot trailers together with an 8-foot drawbar and a triaxle dolly. That's a double." Anyway, long story short, I said, "So why are you backing one trailer up to the dock at a time? Why aren't you just dropping the drawbar off the pintle hook, backing the first trailer up to the second one and have 2 roller doors in between and you load the whole thing together like we do in Australia?"
Right.
And they said, "Oh, no, you can't do that. We can't allow that level of productivity because that would put drivers out of work." So that was it was 20 years ago. And I thought, wow, and I get the job preservation piece, but if you don't innovate and change in this trucking industry, think about the change you and I, Rico, we've seen in 22 years that I've been in this country. It's been exponential. And I think that mindset is what's maybe caused some companies to be so far behind they could never catch up.
Well, of course.
But let's try to connect a couple of dots real quick. When it comes to, so it's unfortunate that everything happened with the layoffs and everything like that.
Yeah.
Definitely, like Chuck said, our heart definitely goes out to all the ladies and gentlemen that were affected by that. That puts approximately 14,000 drivers back in the street, available for work.
I think it's 20. Didn't they talk about 20,000,
22,000? 29,000 employees or something, but a lot of them were mechanics and dock workers.
I think it was 22, Rico, 22,000.
But Rico, those drivers most of them were not long haul. They were terminal to terminal. Okay. Right. These weren't guys and girls that go from New York to LA or a few of them.
I got you, but I guess where I'm trying to connect the dot is I'm trying to see is what's the correlation going to be between for years and years and years, ever since I've gotten into the trucking industry, we keep talking about there's a driver shortage.
Right. Oh, right.
And my beef with that whole point of view is that if there was so much of a driver shortage, then we should see a correlation in rates.
Right. Right.
Because if everything is supposed to be, because from what they talk, I mean, I'm not I ain't necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer, but they told me that it was explained to me that this is supposed to be supply and demand. And if our supply is low, and I understand that we don't quite have enough drivers in the industry, I get that part, and I know that there's not enough drivers coming into the industry, but it still should be, under my humble estimation, we should still see some type of effect on rates. And I guess my question to you, Dean, is that I know it's kind of early in the process, but do you think?
No, I think you're right. Now in LTL, because there was excess capacity, so there's more supply.
Right.
So with the 25, is it 25? I'm going to get the number wrong. Is it 25 million pounds a day? I can't remember how many it was. I should know the number.
It's okay. We can deal with round numbers.
So if it was 25 million pounds a day they were handling, and I'm not sure this is the right number. The point is that as the week has progressed, there was plenty of capacity to absorb all of that in the market. So that supply, that excess supply, has been able to accommodate the extra demand. But what's been happening though is rates are going up, and they're going up though because they're coming from a low base. So they're going up for the existing customers because they were much lower than market, is what we're being told. But I think a lot of the carriers now who have very balanced networks and very disciplined pricing models are not playing the low price game. So rates to haul the freight are going up. Now, I think what you're talking about is are you talking about the line haul rate to say purchase transportation? If Old Dominion wanted you to go and haul a load from A to B, or
well, I'm talking about it in general across the whole entire spectrum.
Right. Okay. So it's a good point. I think in the LTL space, the current thinking is that yes, rates will go up across the board. I don't know by what percentage. Rates are certainly not going to come down because I think there's an opportunistic angle to this.
Well, there's one less player, so there's no, and they're a sizable player in the market. So there's no way that they're going to be, as a matter of fact, I am sure that the Saiyas and the Old Dominions of the world, there is no way that they're going to even match those rates because they've got enough freight, I'm sure, to make the wheels turn and be profitable. And those LTL shippers that ship the traditional LTL freight of 2 skids, 750 pounds of widgets, air-filled widgets or whatever, they still need to get the product to market. So they may have to pay an extra $50 or $75 for that shipment.
Right. And so on our show today, Ken talked about one of his good friends at Pitt, Ohio, another exceptionally well-run line haul LTL firm. He said they're absolutely slammed. They have freight wall to wall. They're sending out road trucks to do city runs, like line haul trucks to do city P&D runs, because that's how many pickups and drops they've got. So I think what's going to happen, Rico, to answer your question, is there's going to be a short-term surge in demand to try and, it's a bit like a massive
till it levels off.
It's like those, you have this big bowling ball going through a hose. It's going to take a while for that to sort of be processed. And then things are going to settle down and networks are going to be balanced, and the P&D drivers at Old Dominion will be doing a new route that the yellow guys used to do, and they'll have met the dock worker and know where the keys are and what time they go to lunch. And all of those additional costs will start to be absorbed into the business. The other part of it, though, is the broader industry. I don't think there's any impact whatsoever on the truckload side, our traditional side of the business, because we just don't see enough parcel freight in big enough volumes to even get to, say, half a truckload. And that doesn't mean drivers aren't doing a backhaul with 6 pallets, right, or a skid, or a hunk of steel. That happens, of course, but not on a consistent basis where you'll say, well, there's actually so much LTL freight like there was back in 2018 and 2021 that people would take a full truckload rate for half a pallet.
They had to get to market.
We're not there. We aren't there yet, and I don't know that ever comes back again. So it's going to be a benefit for the LTL market. Definitely the expedited guys, I think, are going to do pretty well. Hotshots, open deck hotshots could for that freight that doesn't need to go in a dry van. And then, of course, the box truck people with lift gates. I think that's probably where the opportunity exists for people that haven't used LTL a lot but are looking for that alternative.
Yeah. Another, I don't want to shift. I don't want to go completely away from the yellow roadway situation. But another major development that I saw reported was that one of the major players in the autonomous trucking space has decided to bow out, and it kind of and it's thinning. It's really thinning the herd there as well. Comes down to the autonomous space. Do you have any information about that, Dean? Or
I don't. Other than, and I think it was Waymo that was in the news recently. The blue trucks. They had put off people a while ago. Now I think what they've done is they've killed off their autonomous truck side of the business in preference to focusing on the passenger automotive side, I think is the deal. My sense is, from reading between the lines with and what's been said publicly by some of the people involved in this technology, is they found it harder than they thought. And I'm paraphrasing what one of the CEOs said. They found it much harder to simulate how you and I drive a truck, right? I'm going to get this wrong. Basically, what they were saying was, it's very hard to control
other idiots out there.
Well, so that's it. They said what it's hard to do is build a predictive model on things that have never happened.
Right.
So because that's what they're trying to anticipate and have this big truck run. And I've driven 2 of these trucks with level 4 autonomous technology, right? So I'm a hair away from being fully autonomous in this thing, and they're both Freightliner Cascadias, and it didn't feel right. And what didn't feel right was the steering. It wasn't a natural feel because it would oversteer and understeer. And it was
that ain't good
oversteering.
if you got a top heavy load. That ain't good.
So I'm in the truck and we got a load on, and we're out on I can't remember the interstate's name. Is it 75 out near Chattanooga? And I got 3 engineers in the back with their laptops out, and we're driving. And when you go into a corner and you get the camber of the road, sort of, banking,
Right.
the truck drags to the center. Gravity takes over and drags you back. And then it says, oh, hang on, we're offline. And then it takes you back sharply. And I thought,
that's scary.
Now I thought, if I'm next to you and that thing comes across on me, I'm making evasive action in the hammer lane. And next thing, we got an incident happening. And it happened a couple of times. And they said, we haven't figured out how to overcome that. So now I'll give them some ground to, they may have caught up to that, but the fact that they haven't perfected this technology overall, I suspect they're still struggling with the steering piece. What I will say, I love the safety net all of the other technology put around me, like it was telling me on the dash how many feet away the car was in front of me and whether they were moving away or coming toward me.
Right.
And it wasn't so much me as sort of a veteran driver, but I was thinking, heck, if I was new and just concentrating hard on not making a mistake, that's a good thing to have behind me.
God, yeah.
So the advancements in all that driver assist technology were phenomenal, but I think the consensus is in the industry from talking to drivers, we told you so. It wasn't going to work, and why were you trying to get rid of us in the first place? Is sort of the mindset.
I don't think in the end, I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of anybody, because that is not happening anytime soon for the reasons you gentlemen mentioned. But what it does is, I think, is we take younger, inexperienced drivers, we can put them in the truck a lot safer than when we started driving. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and it was bump and grind in the middle of the night.
Right. Yeah, this is the lane departure technology, the collision avoidance, the adaptive cruise control. I loved that bit. I thought that was very, very clever how they put that together. And I walked away from there thinking, I don't think the electronic steering's there yet, but I thought, if I was a new person coming into this industry, I could make some miles in this truck and it would not let me hit anything right while I was getting my judgment squared up. That was sort of, I walked away from it now. Yeah. Of course, they still hit things, but you know what it hasn't done? It hasn't figured out how to stop them taking their 30-minute break in the fuel island. We got to solve that problem.
Yeah.
So for everybody, if you're looking at me on camera and you see me jump just now, you have to excuse me. I hear my garage door start opening. Nobody's home but me, and there's not nobody supposed to be coming. But I just got notification Amazon delivering a package. So
it's the robot.
My wife support those guys.
Yeah.
Hey, we got to keep the economy going, Chuck.
So the other part of the yellow is worth talking about, right? Is all the assets. A lot of the terminals are owned by someone else. I think it's another LTL company. A lot of that $700 million grant from the government went to buying new trucks and equipment from during the pandemic. But the problem is that a lot of them are single drive, right? So the trucks, you've got a 16,000 pound limit on the axle. I don't know what market you would use for a lot of trucks like that. Is there a market for single drive?
I think that you can go with the single, because I used to work at Saya. So and we had the single axles there when I was at Saya. And if I'm remembering correctly, with the pups, the way the pups are set up, you could do 12,000 on the steers, 20,000 on the drive, and 20,000 for each axle.
Right. So would the wheelbases be long enough to put a tag axle under it to get 34 as a day cab?
Well, I remember back in the day. Now I'm not sure if these newer ones are set up like that, because I used to work casual for roadway. So roadway used to have it where the dolly would
exactly,
and go into the
exactly right.
Got what it's called or whatever, but the dolly would go into so that you would
the drawbar would go into the back of the chassis. Exactly right.
Oh, that's that Joe Dog.
Joe Dog.
Fifth wheel.
Yep.
It made the single into a tandem or even a tridem.
Right.
You got it.
That's a Joe Dog. I don't think they allow them anymore. I've not seen one in years and years. because I don't think they're that safe. But I'm just wondering on those trucks if there is a way of stretching that, stretching the chassis and extending the
Right.
drive line and putting
Right.
it either putting a tag or a tandem on.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of equipment there that, maybe the trailers have some value. I don't know about the trucks though, because some of those older P&D trucks,
they
from another century, right?
I thought there are markets for those. There
Right.
are well,
Overseas.
had they gone under a year ago,
Right.
they would have got a lot more money for their equipment.
Right.
Right. Now,
So maybe
I'm
there's some spare
guessing,
parts.
well, no,
Yeah.
I'm also guessing some of the, some of the developing countries,
Right.
um,
Right.
those, they'll take those trucks. They don't have the weight restrictions. They'll load up a load of rock or anything on a single axle and so, because they're small roads. And
But some of the newer ones would have emission compliant engines too.
yeah,
So you would think that maybe there's a drivetrain. You could whip the cab off it and put the gearbox and the engine in another truck. It might
well,
work.
you know what? I'm guessing that with those, if it went to some developing nation, a lot of times they would just delete anything anyways.
So, yeah. So thoughts and prayers to our
Go
good
ahead.
friends over at Yellow
Yeah.
Roadway. We thoughts and prayers to all of you ladies and gentlemen over there. Hopefully, all of you guys land on your feet somewhere. And it's a tough situation, and our thoughts and prayers definitely go out to everyone that is affected.
Right.
I guess now shifting gears, and let's bring it up to modern times. What's going on in the market for us here, truckload wise? What's Dean? Tell us, what is the spot market looking like?
This is precarious. Like you've heard me talk on the show before that every week I look at data, it looks more and more like 2019, what 2019 did to us, which was a bad year for truckers. Rates were pretty flat. Rates just sort of started and dropped about 10 to 15 cents over the course of the year. It was just a steady line down, no peak season. We had a lot of excess capacity from 2018. We've got a similar situation unfolding, but with much higher levels of engagement though from carriers. And so of course, we've got the double whammy of rising diesel prices really hurting a lot of carriers that are just getting by as it is. But the spot market, so if you think about the broader freight market, including the contract work you're involved in, Rico, and the spot market, the totality of the market, it's pretty flat. Manufacturing activity is flat, housing is flat. There's just not a lot of activities. And again, this is the third quarter. Normally we're heading into peak season where you get a lot more imports coming in, and we've got a lot more freight moving ahead of, back to school, Thanksgiving, retail shopping season. Jason Miller had a great post this week, and he said, and he was on our show last week and said straight up, this year is going to be flat. He doesn't expect there'll be a peak season, and it'll be second quarter of 2024, he thinks, before the market will show positive signs of picking up. And I questioned him and I said, so why would we not have a peak season this year? And I have to agree with him. He said, we are still working through bloated inventories,
Right.
And shippers and wholesalers don't know where the consumer is at.
It's true.
And they're not going to overorder and make the same mistake they did last year. So there'll be a lot of just-in-time freight, a lot of last-minute rushing, a lot of short orders. So there could be some value there for carriers. But our best scenario is demand will be flat, and we'll still continue to see carriers leave the industry or go back to driving a truck for another carrier or parking their truck and just waiting this out. Because I think this is going to be a really tough quarter. I was thinking that before diesel went up, which has effectively pushed up operating costs of a long-haul carrier by about 3 cents a mile in the last 2 weeks.
Which is huge.
So in my model, I run on gross profit margins for a long-haul carrier running 115,000 miles a year, 15,000 empty, 100,000 loaded. That truck was making in June, there was a bit of a reprieve because rates went up and diesel was coming down. They were making about 9 cents per mile gross profit in the spot market. With the changes in July and into August now, it's down to 2 cents a mile.
Whoa.
So now 2 cents a mile was exactly where it was in June of 2019.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Dean. Go ahead.
No, I could talk all day. So you
Well, no, I was going to say you were talking about the profitability and things of
Yep.
that nature, and one thing
Yep.
I wanted to take my hat off to DAT is because I recently jumped back on DAT. I recently got low board back because I was like, I'm leaving a little bit of money on the table. Let me start trying to move a little bit something on my backhaul end.
Right.
And so I'm on that tinkering around, and I noticed. I was like, man, these are some new features that weren't on here when I was on DAT before. So you guys actually have a profitability calculator built into the load board.
Right.
And I think that for people that don't that hopefully people are utilizing that and taking that to help them so that they can understand where they're leaving, where they are kind of clipping themselves to really, because a lot of people really don't make the connection mentally when it comes to the rates and everything and actually running a profitable operation. I think a lot of people are still kind of just, hey, if I got a little bit of money left over at the end of the week, it was a good week. And instead of running by the numbers. And I think
when we first started on this show, one of the things we talked about was exactly that, right? Was people not knowing their operating costs.
Right.
So for the last couple of years, I've been working with our engineers to build that out. So because what I wanted to do, Rico, was exactly that, get them thinking about it at the point of negotiating for the load.
That is an excellent feature. I want to give from I'm telling you.
Yeah,
that's something that I just jumped back on maybe about a week or so ago. I jumped back on and I noticed that I was like, man, now that is really great to be able to see where you are in the marketplace, and if you know and understand your numbers, you know that. I'll give an example. I'll give a real world example. For instance, I like to move if I'm going to move on a backhaul rate coming back out of the area that I'm in. It's about a 220 mile run from the part of North Carolina where I run to back to Atlanta. I like to be around $3.50 a mile if I can. Sometimes a little bit better than that. I do a hell of a lot better than that going up, but at least coming back, I like to be at least 350 coming back. And so that what does that number sound like? So okay, I need to be if I'm pulling on a day rate, if I can knock down 800 or something like $800 coming back from the area that I'm at to come back to Atlanta, I'm in the green all day long. But I've ran into some resistance with a couple of brokers that I have contacted over there, coming back on that specific lane, and they're only trying to move freight for only $600. Well, I can't. That's a losing proposition for me.
Well, because you know what, your pickup costs and your delivery costs are the same. No offense, Rico, but your truck is stupid. Just like all trucks, it doesn't know it's going 220 miles. It has no idea. It's a truck. It costs the same to make that pickup, regardless. So, that's the problem. You got your pickup and delivery cost.
Right. So the key to the tool, Rico, is before that we would say to people, you got to be better at negotiating. Well, negotiating from what?
Right.
I'm new to the business. So first of all, we've always said you've got to know your operating costs, but I think what we've lacked is the tools to help people get there in a very easy to use way. So we thought, why don't we start collecting the costs? So what it's allowed us to do, I put in all my costs into the tool initially where I thought they should be. And then what we've been doing is as we get more data in from the carriers, we're calibrating those down and sort of getting rid of the fat-fingered outliers, the ridiculous numbers, and coming up with like we do with RateView, right, which is a fairly good average of what rates are moved for. It's a really interesting tool, and I think it'll move the needle for some of these carriers, because when they're talking to a broker, they've got another data point that they can use in that discussion, like you just spoke about with your $800 load.
So for your marketing department, Dean, kudos to you. If you will help push them in that direction, kudos to you. Definitely salute. But for your marketing department, that's something that they probably really need to push as far as so that people can really understand. And the negotiating factor about that, and like you say, and it really helps the way that you guys have that thing broken down, really simple for them to input their numbers, and time you put your numbers in there, that thing it's pretty, it's pretty.
It's good, isn't it? We road tested it at Mid America Truck Show this year. We had a booth there with the demo set up. We got some really good positive feedback during sort of the initial testing, and I think we rolled it out a little while ago. So yeah, appreciate that.
Is it calculating tolls if there's tolls?
So this is where we ran into some real estate problems. Literally real estate space on the app.
Oh,
I don't have enough space to put in 25 line items. So I had to roll some things up, right?
But you can roll, but you can put some things. I mean, you can depending upon what it is, you can kind of roll that cost into another category.
So I need to check.
At least having people that are I guess the thing that I'm saying for having people that are going from nothing at all, nothing at all to now having something, some kind of tangible number to understand. Oh, okay. This is what they mean by cost per mile.
But Chuck's right, because tolls are one thing that can ruin a trip. So maybe I need to make sure that it's under my miscellaneous category.
And they're everywhere now. It's not just where you live in the Northeast. They've got them in the Carolinas and Florida's horrendous.
Yeah.
They're all over.
Yep.
Missouri, it's they're everywhere.
I like the lane makers part where you can look at what brokers are looking for trucks on a lane, because I think we always talk to carriers about getting out of your comfort zone and having a look at other lanes that you might normally run. It's hard to know where they are. Like, where's the action? Like, what's moving?
You got to become a student of the game and having the load board and constantly looking at. So what I used to do, I used to make real meticulous notes. I would always just see who were the major players you like on a because I was back before when I was running strictly spot market.
Yeah.
What 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I was strictly running spot market, I would just sit and make meticulous notes about who was what and make sure. And I was trying to make sure that I dealt with the same agent, broker, or whatever, so that I could build that rapport and relationship with that agent and that broker.
Yeah.
So sometimes that works out pretty good. But now everything is kind of even so much fragmented to where one agent doesn't know the other agent, and it's there, and it's so sometimes that may not work out. But having that tool that you guys have on there, man, that is a nice little feature. I'm glad to see that you guys did that, because I think it helps so much tremendously. Now, going back to the actual spot market, and things are definitely tightening up, and with the increased fuel costs, I think that we need to kind of understand I guess I don't know if we can break down segment by segment. If we can break down refrigerated, flatbed, and dry van. Which one of those sectors do we think that we're going to have the most volatility? Do you think it's going to be?
I think, gosh, this is going to sound really strange, but I think flatbed. I've never seen flatbed volumes so low. Right, so let me give you a data point here. The number of load posts that we get this is the caveat here is we get a lot more over posting, like the same load posted multiple times in flatbed, right? Because a lot of flatbed work is, so remember, a lot more flatbed freight goes spot than contract, because it's one-off destination project, cranes, all that stuff. And then you got a lot of deadhead miles to the next point because you're in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So whereas about 12% of freight in dry van moves on spot, it's more like 35% in flatbed.
So that makes sense, because it's not repeat orders. That's
right. It's a lot more volatility. So you get a lot more overposting because you got a lot more zip codes to pick from.
Right.
There's just so much. So even with that, take it into account, because the same behavior it's a market behavior. It's not a data error. It's actually legitimate. It's a legitimate data point. Even though we know what's going on, it's actually a valuable data point because it explains market behavior on the broker side.
Right.
The volume of load posts this week was 30% lower than what it was this week in 2019.
Whoa.
In flatbed.
Whoa.
Now, I've been watching this for the most part of the year. The load to truck ratio is a very strong predictor of rates, is lower than 2019. When you look at our weekly chart, it's the lowest it's been in 7 years. Flatbed, and I can't quite get my finger on it. I'd love you guys to give me some input, but the rates are kind of flat. Like the rates aren't going up or down too much. But there's a genuine shortage of trucks. As people say that we can't find flatbed trucks. I think the downturn, lack of volume in flatbed, and high operating costs and diesel prices have forced more flatbedders out of the business than dry van and reefer. That's my theory, and I don't know how to prove it.
Well, you know what, though, you have these giants, the Warners, the Hunts, the Schneiders, the large players in the dry van sector.
Yep.
There aren't very many.
Melton,
mega carriers.
Esky.
Yeah.
Esky. Yep.
But other than that, it's all ma and pa trucking companies. So if they were running, you have a husband and wife that run, they own 10 trucks, and all of a sudden they're not getting as much work as they were, so they get rid of 3 trucks.
That's what I think's happened, Chuck. I'm convinced, and it's not even bringing in the physicality of the job, how hard the job is, right?
Right.
I don't think it's. My gut is it's not a sector that's interchangeable like dry van and reefer.
Right.
I think drop deck, specialized drop deck, RGN, permits, wide load. I think that's a pretty solid niche.
Yeah,
specialized. Yeah. So anyway, I think flatbedders. So there's 2 categories, right? So when I say flatbed, I'm talking open deck, not specialized, right? So not so just traditional skateboard stuff.
Right.
But in the commercial construction space, booming activity for overdimensional drop decks, wide loads, prefabricated concrete, all of the machinery that goes into building warehouses, etc. Companies that are tied to more traditional residential building, because those numbers are way down, there's much less volume there. So there's commercial construction is where the action is, not so much in traditional flatbed, roofing, construction, shingles, plywood, that sort of stuff.
That's what I was going to say. With interest rates, with the interest rates being higher for housing, less people are out going buying houses and everything. So that's the trickle down.
How weird is this that high interest rates have actually are helping building activity, because we aren't selling our homes at 2% mortgage rates. So there's no inventory. So the only inventory is new homes.
Got to build it.
So, but that's not enough volume though to sustain the flatbed market like it was last year. Steel production. I did some numbers on steel production. We moved about 4,000 fewer loads of steel last week than we did the same week last year. Steel volumes are down compared to prior years. We're not moving as much steel as we used to. We're not building as many homes as we used to. So you can see in the general market with manufacturing sort of sort of a bit of a funk at the moment. You can see why flatbed volumes aren't there. Dry van and reefer though is a little bit different. I think they've probably got a bit less volatility, Rico, to answer your question. There's definitely a lot more seasonality in those two. So reefer, when I look at rates in dry van and reefer, they're almost identical. Mm-hmm. The difference in nominal value, one's higher than the other, but the shape of how they go through the year is all very seasonal, and both are in this trough right now. Both kind of went up at 4th of July and came down, even though it was produce season peak. Both will go up at Thanksgiving and drop away, and then they'll both go at Christmas again. Flatbed took off at the start of the year, was going gangbusters for the first 4 months, and then the wheels fell off. And it tanked. Now it did that in 2018 also, but it held on to about July, August before it dropped. Flatbed was starting to drop a little bit earlier in late May and June. So this wasn't a lot of momentum in flatbed this year. So a lot more volatility there.
My understanding, gentlemen, is that flatbed is, and the trucking industry is the first one in a recession, first one out of a recession. And out of the trucking sector, the flatbed sector is the first one to feel it, and they're the first one both ways, in and out. I know of somebody that's very well connected. The fellow I know is in construction, but he's very well connected with some of the larger builders and architect firms in the Toronto area. And their move on things is that they will finish all the contracts they have right now. They'll honor them, finish building them, and they're not doing anything for the time being. They're taking a hiatus until they figure out the pulse of the economy and what's going on with interest rates.
Right. So I could give you the ISM Purchasing Managers Index came out today, and it's it's a closely held data point by Wall Street and a lot of economists. It's the Institute of Supply Management Purchasing Managers Index, and it's an index that is made up of a number of different data points that speak to the manufacturing economy. The president said he thinks the market's in a bit of a trough, but he thinks bottoming out has occurred. And why he said that was really interesting. It's a diffusion index. So for those that don't know, a diffusion index is anything above 50, the economy is expanding. Anything below 50, the economy is contracting. It's been below 50 for 9 consecutive months, but it's been increasing under the 50. So it's getting closer, getting back towards 50, right? So it's less bad than it has been, if that makes sense.
Dean, I don't know how we can, and I'm not disputing what he said, but some of the former matrix that we all use, I don't know whether they work today. I know that in Canada, we always use unemployment as a matrix, and everybody's going, well, things are great. We created so many more jobs. Yeah, because we don't have any workers. I went into a store tonight. I went into 3 stores trying to buy a sports coat for a trip I'm going on. I couldn't find anybody to look after me. I'm not joking.
So let me finish this point. He said that the composite index was 46.6. It's the longest stretch since the Great Recession in 2008 that it's been under 50. But he said there was some parts of the index are actually showing improvement. And it was really interesting. He said all 10 sub-indexes remained below 50, but 8 increased. Right, and that's a really important point because they're all to do with manufacturing of stuff that trucks haul. I think why this is still a solid data point, and it tracks nicely with some of the things Jason Miller puts out at Michigan State University with his index, because his data is rolled up. This data is rolled up into that. He says that about 63% of the ton miles in trucking come from manufacturing. The manufacturing is what we haul as an industry. So it's still a solid data point. And I think that fits to answer Rico's earlier question about where is the spot market. It's been bottoming out and sort of sitting in this trough for 3 or 4 months now. We've been saying that it may sit like this for another couple of months before there's any movement. So the market is definitely not getting worse, but it's not getting better. And I know that's a bad answer, because that's the typical, when you sit on the fence, you get a rear end full of splinters. And right. So that's kind of, no one really knows the answer to this question other than people that are buying freight that we haul don't know where our heads are at. They don't know what you and I are thinking. Are we worried about spending? Are we cutting back on buying those big ticket items? Are we spending more on travel and services and less on TVs and chairs that we haul? And that's what they don't know right now, because we've still got a freight recession. It looks like we've missed the economic recession here in the US. It looks like it'll be a soft landing now, as opposed to the recession that was being talked about for a year. So it looks like we may sort of skate out of this with a mild recession but there's still this fear of inflation being tamed and cooling down the economy. So you're right, though. There's a lot of mixed signals from a lot of data points that give us pause for concern. I'm pretty, the one data point I stick with is Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index. Even though it's 45 days behind where the market is because it's government published data, it's based on 41 freight generating commodities, of which the most influential is food, manufacturing, mining, food. Yeah. So it's got, where we are now is he said it'll be flat for this year, but flat is still higher by about 5 to 6% on where 2018 and 2019 were. Right. So that I think I take, I look at that and I take, some good news out of that and think, okay, things aren't as bad from a demand point of view as everyone makes out. The challenge is, though, that in that period from June of 2020 to the end of 2021, we added 150,000 carriers to the industry.
Exactly.
And we've lost about 25,000 since. So this is what a lot of people don't see, is that there's a lot of carriers coming into the industry every day and a lot leaving. Well, in the last 6 months, there's been more leaving that are coming in. And what's interesting is we are at the lowest point in July. The data showed that we had the fewest carriers join and the fewest carriers leave in the last year. So things are really cooling down, and at some point we will get the same number of loads as trucks.
Right. Yeah.
But still, so even though demand is flat, we've still got more trucks on the road chasing that freight.
Right.
But it's little things. It's like the increase in the cost of fuel.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that's going to shake a whole bunch of carriers out because they were sitting on the, they were basically, they didn't have any wiggle room for that 3 cents a mile.
No.
When they're making 2 cents a mile and their expenses went up 3 cents, they're down. Now they're losing a penny a mile. How long are you going to run?
I don't know if you saw the Washington Post article this week. It talked about long haul truck drivers, and it was talking about a good friend of mine, Darby Pedro, who was featured on the front of the WAPO, and it was a really good story because Darby was a 9-year veteran driving an auto hauler here in Boston. Went out and bought a $50,000 Maverick Freightliner, which are a really good buy at $50,000 for a 3-year-old truck. Bought a reefer, used DAT's load board, was running. He's run out to the Midwest and down to North Carolina and come back. He'd had a mix of 50% spot, 50% contract. He was averaging about $4 a mile over the course of a couple of years. And he said, what changed when the market started to turn, where I would normally get 7,000 to 8,000, I'm getting 3,000 to 4,000 to run the same load. And he said, I just decided that wasn't worth it. So he got out and he's driving a triaxle dump truck around town here. And I think he is typical of a lot of people that joined the industry, made some good money, and said, there's something not right with this, and I don't think I'm going to stick it out, like a lot of other carriers have done when the price you had to pay wasn't as great in prior freight cycles. I think the reason why people have had to pay a lot in this freight cycle is they've had to pay a lot for used trucks and a lot for insurance as new entrants. That's right. Different than previous freight cycles, because every week in our show, in our comments, we get guys saying, what do I do with this truck that I owe $130,000 on, but it's worth $50,000? Yeah, I can't answer that.
All over the place. And, that's like we've had them up here in Canada that went out and, against my judgment and, against what I was telling them to do, went out and bought trucks for $250,000, Canadian, of course. So that's about 200. It's almost $200,000 US. And now, they've run those trucks for 6 months or so. They're probably worth half of that in this market.
I know. So that's a problem for carriers. That especially because one of the questions that experts raised early in the pandemic was, where are drivers getting all the money for this? How are they buying these trucks? One of the theories raised was they were using the equity in their homes.
Some of them were.
Now,
money was real easy. Money was real easy to come by as well.
From finance, right?
It was real easy to come by, and I can't tell you. And I think that I got a show that I want to do that I'm going to do when Chuck's away. Not because I was waiting on him to go away, but it's just that's just kind of the way
he doesn't want me to interfere.
Work out. But I wanted to do a show on business, on the actual business end, and when it comes to financing, because a lot of people, I get calls 2 or 3 times a day. People calling me, we see that you're in business. Are you looking to buy any equipment, so on and so forth. And I know if I'm fielding 2, 3, 4, 5 phone calls a day about that, and I can only imagine interest rate that those people are charging. But versus if I have a relationship with my bank, and I can go to my bank and I can talk to my bank and get develop that relationship and get a great rate through my bank versus going through different brokers that are out here trying to move money. Because I know for a fact, it's kind of like, I guess, my take on factoring. I know for a fact they're paying through the nose. The interest rates on some of that stuff, you're paying through the nose. And that may be because you may not have, your credit may not be as spotless as you may want it to be, but that's something that you can control. That's something that you can fix. And over time, if you work on it and if you make the main thing, just like when we talking about operating costs. But right now, you got to control as much operating costs as you can. And one of the biggest factors, the diesel fuel has went up, but you still slow down. You got to, you know what I'm saying? All the different little nuances, you got to be able to try to tighten your belt as much as you can, especially in this market, to try to make it through this thing. Because the object of the goal, in my mind, is you don't necessarily have to be thriving. If you are thriving, great, but just survive.
So Rico, we had I don't know if you know Adam Wingfield. We had Adam on our show a little while ago. He was an owner operator. He was with Prime for about 12 years, and he runs Innovative Logistics. He's a consultant now, but from being an ex-owner operator and successful to advising people on what to do. We had him on our show a couple of weeks ago, and it was really, really interesting because I've seen him speak at a number of conferences. And I'm kind of blown away by some of the advice he gives folks, because I think, wow, I wish I'd have known that when I was starting out in trucking. But the one thing that I did, and I asked him this question, I always knew from a good friend of mine who's Bob he's done about 6 million miles in Australia. He's just retired as an owner operator running road trains. But he one of those owner operators that makes it look easy. But, when you run, and these are, remember in Australia, they run a couple of 100,000 miles a year solo without any problem whatsoever. He said, one of the things I've always done, because I said, Bob, how have you done this so successfully and weathered so many market cycles? He said, first of all, I always put money away for the rainy day. How I do that is very, very simple. I amortize all of my fixed costs over 10 months, not 12.
Yep.
So my insurance, my rent, my finance cost, I take the total for the year, divide it by 10, and that's my payment. Because he said, I can guarantee you're going to have a breakdown that's going to cost you a couple of weeks. You're going to want to go on vacation, and there's going to be a cyclone or a hurricane or a bridge is going to be out. You are going to lose time no matter what. And he said, he did that for nearly 45 years.
Yeah, you can't do 52. You cannot do 52.
He said 40. He worked his whole year on 48 at the most, but he always amortized everything over 10 months. And I thought, I did that. And I started that. We even did that on our home mortgage where we paid off more. It's the same as paying off a bit more on your mortgage. You started to pay off the principal as well. It was the same principle. And I said, Adam, was that good advice? And he said, that is probably the most important thing you should be doing, is thinking about creating that buffer. Because remember a year ago, we said put money away for the rainy day. Right, we kind of joked and said, well, I wonder how many will listen to us. Well, apparently a bunch did, and probably a bigger bunch didn't. Right, they didn't get the message because they weren't thinking about the business of being in business. Because that was the one thing Adam said, that as a young man he never paid enough attention to, was the business side of being in business. And he said,
that's the thing about it, man. God bless everybody that has that's brave enough to try to attempt to be an entrepreneur. But being an entrepreneur, especially on small guys like myself and others that are like me, it can be really lonely. There's not and if you don't necessarily have the big network or the other people on your team to kind of help you, guide you through the different things, this thing can be a minefield to navigate. And the biggest thing is making sure that you can make it to the next cycle. If you can make it through this one, then
you're right. I mean, that's the thing about longevity.
Keeping the lights on and the doors and the truck running. If you can manage to keep doing that, you're a success. No matter how rough or tough you think it may be. I want to put a feather in everybody's cap. If you can keep that, if you keep everything moving, you are a success, my friend.
So we're almost up on time, but we asked Nicole Glenn from Candor, we said, what's your advice? She said, this is time to grind. She said, is this time to be growing, cutting back? She said, this is time to grind. You're going to have to grind it out this year. This is going to be a tough year. You've got to get ready to grind.
Yep, that's a
really good way to think about it.
Exactly what I said earlier. I was leaving money on the table. I was leaving money on the table. I said, let me jump back on DAT low board. Let me get
So good for you.
I appreciate Dean, you taking time out of your schedule, man.
Anytime, guys. I love being on with you too.
We love having you.
Flow right through the hour whenever we have you on. It's always great conversation. Dean,
it's gone quick. Yeah.
Let everyone know where they can find your work and everything that you do over at DAT.
Yeah. If you Chuck did a great promo video in front of an International Lone Star. I don't know where you got that thing from, Chuck, but that was a great video. I love that video.
So the truck is the hood.
Yeah, it was you in front of it. The bull bar was pretty handy, the moose bar. But I thought so social media. So to that point, social media, Instagram. You can find me at the Grumpy Pete. You can find me, Dean Croke, on LinkedIn. And you can find us every Tuesday, 10 a.m. on YouTube, DAT Freight and Analytics, our live show we do at 10 a.m. every week. Got a good CEO. We've got CEO Melanie Patterson on next week, talking about government contracts for small carriers and how to run a small fleet. But she's the expert in government contracts.
That name sounds very familiar. I think I'm familiar with her.
You would know Melanie Patterson, CEO from Chicago.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Good deal.
Good show. Yep.
Well, Chuck, we know that you're getting ready to take a little hiatus on us, but
Rico and I have made arrangements for shows to happen during my little vacation. I'll tell you guys all about it when I get back. Rico, I'm going to let you back it in a hole for another week. Dean, again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. As always, we really enjoyed having you. I do see a question here.
I can answer that if you like.
Go ahead, please.
This is so it's a question we get all the time. The rates that we use in our RateView product come from the loads that carriers agree to move the loads for. So they're not DAT rates. They're the rates submitted by our contributors, and our contributors send rates in every night. They are shippers, brokers, and carriers, but they're based on the agreed rate between the carrier and the broker, or the carrier and the shipper. So as to the data not being accurate, I've never really understood that, because it's an average of all of the rates on a lane. Now, you might not agree with the rates, and a lot don't, because the rates are crazy on some lanes because they're backhaul lanes. The rates are what they are submitted to us. They are the average of all of the rates on those lanes. We do take out some of the highs and lows that are kind of obvious, errors in the rate submission. But rest assured, the rates are accurate, and they're based on the loads that people move. They are not, like some others in the market, based on the posted load board rate.
No.
Let me. And I don't want to carry. I'm not trying to carry water for anybody, but the rate conversation. Understanding what your numbers are. Understand your numbers and move freight that's profitable for you. There's no such thing as cheap freight. Cheap freight to someone that may consider it cheap freight that has a truck payment versus somebody that doesn't have a truck payment. If you understand your numbers and your operating costs and understand your margins and know where those things are, you have to get into and tighten down on the numbers. What DAT offers is a tool, nothing more than a tool and a suggestion. By no means does that mean that you need to, that's the gospel, that's what you have to go by.
Yep.
Like I was saying earlier, in a lane, in my particular lane, I know what my costs are in my lane. There's somebody in my lane that wants to move refrigerated freight from that part of North Carolina back to Atlanta market for $600. It's not even. If I were at home, I wouldn't even roll out of bed to crank my truck up for $600. That's just me. But you have to understand what your numbers are. And,
exactly.
I hope I'm not trying to come across condescending or anything like that to anybody, but I just want us to take responsibility and accountability for us as our actions and what we are doing, because we can't put it on. At the end of the day, nobody's putting a gun to anybody's head and making you accept a rate that you think is cheap or you think is not acceptable. You do that on your own volition. You accept the rate. Nobody's forcing you to take it. If you let it sit, or if you don't think that it's right for you, then the rate will have to adjust, or somebody will take it that's eventually going to drive themselves out of business.
Yeah.
It's simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. That's my point.
Yeah. This usually happens when the market gets soft and the rates get cheap. We get blamed for it, but we
That's
didn't
right.
get any credit when rates were $10 a mile.
It has nothing to do with you. You guys are just that's it. Seriously.
No, I think that, you know, sometimes our people get frustrated and you know,
and rightly so. Yeah.
So
that's what we're trying to do with shows like this, right? We're trying to
I
educate.
I want us to just understand our part in this, in all of this, and we have more power than what we understand.
I think we do. Yeah.
We have to learn how to we have to learn the nuances of negotiating. We have to learn how to develop the relationships to be able to get into the groove of a conversation, to be able to even get to a point to, you got to understand, if you're dealing with somebody that's strictly transactional, then they're strictly transactional. And you got to, that's a different negotiating tactic for dealing with somebody that's a strictly transactional. If there's someone that's willing to build a relationship with you, then okay, now but you have to learn, these are the different nuances of the dance of learning negotiating. And you have to be able to pick those things up over the course of the conversation, and how the ebbs and flows of the conversation go. It's much more nuanced than what we can probably go into right now at the end of the podcast. But that's definitely something that we.
Thank you for the question. Anyway, appreciate the question. Yeah.
But once again, Chuck, you get ready to get out of here on us. We wish
send me an email. I think I'll have email where I'm going, but you can send it to me, Chuck Snow 280. That's Chuck Snow 280 at outlook.com. Put your phone number on there. I will try to get back to everybody with answers. And with that,
wishing you safe travels, Chuck. You and the wife, you much deserved, well-deserved vacation.
Thank you.
Please enjoy it. Looking forward to the pictures and everything to come when you guys get back. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to, for my co-host Chuck Snow, this has been the Racing Lanes podcast. We want to thank Dean Croke for taking time out of his schedule to come on and join us, share a wealth of information with us. We are definitely grateful for you doing so, Dean. And we want you guys, ladies and gentlemen, out there to stay safe, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. It'll be pre-recorded, but we got a show in the can for you guys.
Cannot wait. All right.
Yeah,
Good night. God bless you, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.